Hello and welcome back to my channel. Um, Thank you so much for coming back. It is the first video of the year that I'm filming, and it is the wrap-up for December. I haven't gotten around to that until now, so yeah, let's talk about the last books I read in 2024, and yeah, I don't know, they were really mixed, and I did start with the best book of the month, which is a little bit annoying. But yeah, I did read the absolute favorite book of the month as the first book of the month, and that is Guardians of the West by David Eddings, which is the book one in the Mandalorian series, which is the second series by the author. I've talked about this book a few times now on this channel. I think in one vlog or like two vlogs, and then on my favorite books of 2024 video. And so I'm not gonna say too much about it here. I also did, I think, a book about David Eddings in general. But yeah, I absolutely love this book. It is like a continuation of the first series, which with the same main characters. So you should actually read the first series before you read this one, which, you know, so it's a little bit harder to recommend because I would need to recommend you to read the Begariad first, which is the name of the first series. But it is a really classical fantasy with like mostly set in medieval times, with a little bit of magic, but like pretty classical with the focus more on humans than on anything else. And there are a few like mythical creatures, but like really little compared to what we see in a lot of modern fantasy. I gave it 5 stars. I had an absolute blast to get back to all of the characters I loved in the first series. There's a lot of growth even in this first book when it comes to the characters. David Eddings is fantastic when it comes to characters, and so yeah, I would always recommend him if you want to read some really classical fantasy that is focused on characters and where like I feel like pretty much the setup of the world and stuff like that are like a neighboring role. Can you say that in English? I'm not sure. Like they aren't the main focus of the book, and you do like it. You feel that in the book, but I didn't feel like it made the book any worse. I didn't mind at all because I love the focus on the characters, and I really love the characters. Even the morally gray and the ones that turned out to be more traitorous, stuff like that. I love them all, which is kind of rare for me in books. So yeah, I would really recommend reading David Eddings. Just like start with the first series, maybe not with the second one, but yeah, I absolutely blast starting October with that book. But from there on out, it has gotten really bad. The second book I read was The Racketeer by John Grisham, and this was, I think, my third John Grisham book, and by far the worst of them. I didn't really like this at all, mainly because of the main character. I didn't like the main character, and he never got any more likable throughout the book, and that kind of ruined the book for me. It is a true crime book about a case of like there having been killed a senator. Oh, a federal judge, not a senator. And there were only ever like 4 that got killed, and then we have the case where one gets killed, and our main character is currently sitting in prison. He is a judge or an attorney that or lawyer, whatever the right word for it is. But he was, in his opinion, wrongfully convicted because he had something to do with a property that was connected to a criminal case. He tells us he hasn't had any connection to it and it was just bad luck, but whatever. He got 10 years for it. He couldn't even defend himself in court, which I found to be quite weird from the beginning. But yeah, he sits in prison, and we start with the story when he's 5 years through his sentence, and he pretty much has taken on all of the other people in the jail, and he's helping them with like advice and stuff like that. So he tries to paint him as this really nice guy who tries to help everyone, and then because of the judge that gets shot, he is like, hey guys, I know who did it. I can tell you if you let me out of prison. And the story goes from there, and it's pretty much just our main character using every trick in the book to stay out of prison and telling lies, working with other not so nice people, stuff like that. I didn't like the character as he was. I just didn't like the main character. I don't think he's a good person, to be honest. and that kind of ruined the book for me because the story kind of hinges on you rooting for the main character, kind of. So if you don't do that, the story kind of goes from there. So yeah, I gave that 2 stars. And then we're coming directly to the next 2-star read, which was Some Desperate Glory by Emily Tash. This is a sci-fi kind of space opera-ish book. We have our main character who is kind of a genetically modified human, and they all live on this small station on the moon because Earth got, like, there was a war and Earth got kind of destroyed, and so they had to flee, and her main operative is to get back to Earth and win the fight against the Wisdom, which is the thing that governs the aliens that they fight against. And instead of being sent to Earth on the mission, she gets sent to the nursery to make babies. And it's kind of weird because that is not what she was trained for, and so obviously the story goes from there. She doesn't go to the nursery. She's like, fuck this, I'm gonna go to Earth, I'm gonna fight, I'm gonna win this for us. And then she finds out that her brother has gotten like a suicide mission, and he ran away as well because he didn't want to do a suicide mission, and it all goes from there. I just found the book to be kind of weird. I didn't enjoy the way the story was told. There's also like a parallel dimension slash time travel thing in here. But the problem is the main character was really, really unlikable, just as in the last book, because she sees herself as this like totally cool, can do everything person. And in the beginning, she talks to her brother, and her brother's like, "Oh, take a rest. We have rest time. You should actually take the rest." And she's like, "Oh, it's so bad to take the rest. We have to fight. We don't have a home anymore. We have to fight, and we have to do everything." And she's like just this really know-it-all, better than everyone person, and it doesn't change throughout the book. No matter what happens to her, it doesn't really change. And I found that to be incredibly unlikable, and so I wasn't rooting for her. I was kind of rooting for her brother more than for our main character, which is kind of not the greatest thing. And so I didn't really care for what she did throughout the rest of the book. So 2 stars. If you like unlikable characters, The Racketeer and Some Desperate Glory might be books for you, but I personally cannot deal with unlikable characters. I don't know, I wish I could, I can't, and so these books just really aren't for me. So 2 stars. Then I listened to 1984 by George Orwell, and I don't know what I expected, but it wasn't what I got. I think the biggest problem was that I heard so much about the book and how important it is and how impactful it is and what a great classic it is, that I think I had like really, really high standards for the book, and the book fell flat, which is probably something that happens quite often if you have way too high standard for a book. I gave it 3 stars. I don't think it's a bad book. I just found it to be way too slow for my taste. Just the way the story was told felt really, really slow and boring to me. And even though I think it's an important story and it's it's a really, really good thing to talk about, and I think everybody should read the book, I personally didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would, and that was kind of disappointing. That's a problem I have with a lot of like classic books, that they are so hyped up because, oh my god, they're a classic and everybody should have read them and stuff like that. And then you read them, and for you, it's might just not be your taste in book, and then you're like, oh, I didn't like it at all, like what are they all talking about? And I had that a little bit with 1984. Like I get that the story is important, like absolutely. I think it's a topic you should read about, but it's like it's just not my type of writing style, to be honest. So yeah, don't blame me. I'm giving it 3 stars. Also, I'm not going to talk about the story because it's 1984. It's a classic. Everybody probably knows the story. I'm probably one of the last people to read it because I get that most people read it in school. I didn't read it in school, so this is the first time I've ever read it, and it was kind of not what I expected, to be honest. But yeah, I don't know. It's also kind of a sad ending. I didn't really like the ending. It makes sense in the story, but I didn't like it. Then we have gotten around to another fantasy, which is Empire in Black and Gold by Adrian Tchaikovsky. I was really sad about this. I gave it 3 stars. it's not a bad book, but I really, really loved the beginning of the book. It is a fantasy about insect people. They are pretty like human-ish. And then they have like wings, or the mantis have like blades that come out of their forearm and stuff like that. So they are modified humans, but like it's just how they are. That was super, super interesting, and I really, really liked the beginning. And our main character is like an older beetle kind, I think. And he warns everybody else that the wasps are coming, and they want to like topple the kingdom the beetle is living in, which is, I think, the lowlands. And nobody cares really what he's talking, because the wasps are kind of playing nice and infiltrating where he lives, which is the university city. And so he doesn't really have a choice but to kind of flee and try to stop the wasps from doing that. And so he recruits four pupils of his. One of his is his niece, one is his adopted charge, and then they have one dragonfly kind who's like a really exotic guy, because they are rarely moving out of their kingdom, and mostly their kingdom got destroyed by the wasps. And because nobody like believes them, they have to kind of flee and try to get through it. So that is what I liked. But then we came around to like really weird caveats in the story where I was like, really? For example, spiders don't have any kind of inclination towards technique and towards anything to do with machines and stuff like that. And it is a steampunk fantasy. And so our spider, for example, can't use a crossbow because she just cannot physically push the button because she doesn't understand. Which, you know, what kind of an explanation is that? She's physically capable of pushing the button. Her brain just cannot comprehend how to do that. Which, you know, is that such a thing? I don't know, it threw me really off. I just didn't think that works in any sense. And then once they are in the new city where they fled to, they get broken up, the group, and then the spider girl, gets really weird, and I didn't like the direction in which the characters go. And then we also have like an unrequited love story in there, which I kind of saw it coming, but I didn't like it because it's like the fourth in the group of the pupils is in love with the niece of our main character, and he never tells her, as far as I can tell. And then he is heartbroken when she didn't love him and likes somebody else. Like, boy, you didn't tell her. What did you expect? Like, it's really weird. And then he, has his heart broken, and because of that, something's happened. And I just didn't like the way the story evolved. So I will not continue with the series, but yeah, I give it 3 stars. It's not bad. I think it's probably one of those that you need to try the first book and see how you like it. But I personally didn't like the direction the book went on, which I was really disappointed in, because I really like the sci-fi from Aaron Tchaikovsky and the short fantasy I've read by him, so I was really disappointed that I didn't like that one. And then we are with the last 2 books, which both were 2 stars. But the first one is my own fault. This is Greenwood by Michael Christie, and I knew I didn't like the book, but I read it nonetheless because I bought it. I don't know why I bought it a few years ago. It is a contemporary fiction that tells the story of a family that has to do with trees. It's the furthest thing from what I like in reading, and I don't know why I ever bought it. It just didn't make any sense. But I had it on my shelves. I wanted to at least give it a chance. I finished it. I didn't like it. It's just a story about a family and their connection to trees, and we go through, I think, 4 different generations of the family, and then in the end we come back to the first generation we start with. We pretty much start in the future, or present for the book, which is 2038 or something like that, and then we go back to the 1900s, and then we go back to the present, and it's just a story about the people, how they are connected to trees in different ways, and how they didn't always see eye to eye, and pretty much our main character just wanting to understand who's her father. And I did not like it at all. I found it to be incredibly boring. I'm really sorry. I'm not one for biographies. This reads a little bit like a biography, but it's imagined characters, like it's fictional characters. And I think there's a lot of worth in this book, just not for somebody like me. If you like trees, like eco stuff, eco-terrorism, and just like saving the planet a little bit, like topics like that are all in here, and the kind of the change from generation to generation, and that they're not seeing eye to eye, and the difficulties in that. I personally just thought it was incredibly boring. But you know, I knew that. I tried to read the book once and put it away, and I don't know why I bought it. I think I thought it was a fantasy. I don't think it looks like a contemporary, to be honest. I think it looks more a little bit more futuristic. I don't know why. But yeah, it was, I don't know. I finished reading it. I knew I wouldn't like it. And then we have the last book I read in December, which is The Breaker by Minette Walters. And this one I liked in the beginning, and then I didn't like it anymore. I like the idea of the story. It is a thriller about a woman who is found on a beach, clearly assaulted, and she died while trying to save herself, swimming into the beach, but she drowned. And they then find a young child walking around on the streets in a nearby village, and they put two and two together that it's the child of the woman who died, and so they try to solve what happened. And pretty much all of the characters are incredibly rude, unlikable, and bad people, which kind of made it hard for me, because coming back to the topic, that I need to like at least one character in a book, and I didn't in this one. In the beginning, I thought it was just a portrayal of like a rural English village and their rudeness to strangers and tourists that they kind of don't want to have there. But like then going throughout the book, it's just no, they're all bad people, kind of. Everybody has their own problems and vices, and I don't know, they portray this woman as like really horrible and promiscuous, even though she was just like in a bad situation. And not that I'm like saying the woman did nothing wrong. She also did something wrong, like she had an affair, for example. But in the grand scheme of things, they just portray her as such a bad person, even though she really isn't when you know, get all of the information in the book. And then I don't know, all of the people are just really weirdly sexual, stuff like that. It's I don't know, the whole book just gave me such a weird and off-putting vibe, starting at like the 50-page point, that I just really disliked it. So I gave it 2 stars, because I think the crime in itself is interesting, and you know, even though the reasons for why the crime happened are really convoluted and kind of dumb, I think it was a good explanation, because let's be honest, a lot of crime is just plain dumb. You know, if you look at true crime, some of those stories are just like, what the fuck stories. And that story like kind of falls into the same vein, but like it was so unlikable, the characters, just the whole feeling of the book, that I couldn't get myself to give it any better of a rating than 2 stars. Which, you know, if you like books like that, you actually might like the book. I just personally like don't enjoy that. If I read a thriller, I want to have a detective that I really, really like and can connect with, you know, and that just wasn't the case with this book. So yeah, those are all of the books I read in December. I don't know, it was I don't know, it started so good and then it got so bad towards like the middle and the end, you know. So I don't know, but I guess that is what happens if you have a lot of books on your TBR that you aren't that excited for anymore. But yeah, thank you for watching. If you've read any of these books, leave your opinion down below, please. I would like to hear that. I always like to get different feedback from different people, what they like about books, or maybe you have a totally different perspective on one of these books, and I really would like to hear that. So yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you have gotten nicely into the new year, and hopefully I will see you in the next video. Bye!